Alfred Hitchcock was a director who had a very unique style of filmmaking. His films can be looked at through a number of different lenses, but an excellent means of analyzing them is through semiotics. In its most bare form, semiotics refers to the study of signs. Signs are something that can be used as a tool in order to signify something else. In addition to this idea is the notation that sign is comprised of two main components, the signifier and the signified. The signifier refers to the form the sign takes, while the signified represents the concept. Further developing this idea, the signified can be split into denotation and connotation. Denotation is the part of the sign that can be recognized immediately or instantly. Connotation, meanwhile, refers to how a sign is interpreted. Finally is the concept of myth. Myth is a term given to represent prominent ideologies. These ideologies are created by merging connotation and denotation together. Now let us examine how these concepts can be viewed in The Birds by closely examining a scene. We will also look at how these elements are used as a means of mirroring the imagery of the opening scene. The scene we shall examine is the schoolyard scene. In this scene, Melanie visits the school in order to pick up Kathy. The first denotation is that of the school, which is shown prominently throughout the scene. Next, the children are shown being in class, singing. This forms the main component of audio for the majority of the scene. While waiting for the class to end, Melanie sits outside on the bench to smoke a cigarette. This is where we get our next signifier. The signifier comes in the form of the birds, specifically crows, that gather on the playground equipment. The final denotation in the scene is when the children leave the school. They are attacked by the birds. Here the audio switches first to that of feet running, then to that of birds screeching and children screaming. For each denotation shown throughout this scene, there are connotative meanings which are associated with them. The image of the school carries with it the connotation of being in a cage. However, instead of for birds, this cage belongs to the children. This connotative meaning can also be compared to the opening scene. However, it's the birds that are in cages and the human characters who are free. The children singing is also related to the connotative meaning of the children being placed in a cage. This again can also be compared to the opening scene. However, the children replace the birds in their cage and through their singing. The next connotation that can be applied to this scene is that of the birds themselves. The specific connotation here is that the birds are all crows, which are black and could be viewed as being evil or an evil entity. Lastly, when the birds attack the children, there is a shift in audio from calm to running feet to screeches and screams as the birds attack the children. This is almost a reversal of the opening scene, where the birds flee their cage and the human characters try to catch them. This connotation is implied by the fact that the birds don't attack the children until they leave their school, or in this instance, their cage. Lastly, we will look at how the denotation and connotation within the scene combine to form myth. Remember that myth refers to the dominant ideologies. Bearing this in mind, there is very clear evidence for an ideological perspective being present within this scene. The idea being presented is that of man versus nature. Throughout the scene, the denotation and connotation combine in order to help highlight this. The first is the denotation of the school and its connotation of being a cage. This supports the man versus nature concept because the school can be viewed as a cage, but instead of housing birds, it cages people, specifically the children. The next way denotation and connotation merge into this myth is a role reversal of people and the birds, and is presented as the children singing. The denotation here is the singing itself, with the connotation being implied that the children are singing from their cage, just like the birds in the opening scene. The final way that connotation and denotation combine is that the birds do not attack the children until they leave the school. This is denoted by the birds attacking, and a shift in audio from calm to hurried footsteps and finally screeching and screaming. This is a reversal of the opening scene where the birds escape their cage. It is implied the birds are attacking the children. Here is nature fighting back, and thus shows the dominant ideology of man versus nature. By closely examining this scene, it is clear that Hitchcock was presenting it almost as a mirror image of the opening scene. By using semiotics as a means of analysis, we can see how Hitchcock played with the idea of how these signs were presented and flipped them in their roles. We also see the ways in which they were denotated and their connotative meanings were combined in order to present the ideology of man versus nature. As such, we are able to see Hitchcock's genius at work, and just one of the ways semiotics, denotation, connotation, and myth can be applied to the birds in order to keep us better understanding the film as a creative piece of art.